There is a profound irony in leadership communication. Leaders are often celebrated for their ability to speak, to inspire with words, to persuade, to command attention. But what truly distinguishes the most transformational leaders from the merely competent is not their speaking. It is their listening. Most people listen not to understand, but to reply. The mind races ahead, crafting arguments, planning responses, judging, defending. While the other person is speaking, we are already halfway through formulating what we will say next. True active listening is a radical act because it demands that we silence that internal monologue. It requires that we lay down our weapons of self-defense and open ourselves completely to another's reality. Active listening is not passive. It is not simply sitting quietly while someone talks. It is an active, dynamic, engaged process. It requires attention, presence, humility, and courage. To truly listen is to step into another's mental and emotional world without trying to control, correct, or fix it. It is to temporarily suspend your own agenda, your own interpretations, your own needs, to be fully available to what is happening in the other person. For leaders, active listening is a superpower. It builds trust in ways that speeches never can. It resolves conflicts before they erupt. It surfaces hidden problems before they become crises. It uncovers insights that no survey or report could ever reveal. When people feel deeply heard, something remarkable happens. They open. They let down their guard. They access their best thinking, their deepest creativity, their truest selves. Think about it. How often have you felt transformed simply because someone truly listened to you, not with judgment, not with impatience, not with pretense, but with full, compassionate attention? It is rare. It is precious. And it is profoundly healing. As leaders, our ability to listen actively determines the emotional climate we create. A leader who listens half-heartedly teaches their team that their voices do not matter. A leader who listens fully teaches their team that they are valued, respected, and essential. Active listening is not a soft skill. It is not a nice to have. It is a critical leadership competency. Because in the end, leadership is not about knowing all the answers. It is about creating the conditions where collective intelligence can emerge, and that begins with listening. In the next slides, we will break down the different levels of listening, the barriers that sabotage it, the concrete techniques that can transform it, and the art of hearing not just words, but meaning. But let us begin here with the simple, powerful truth. If you want to lead people, you must first truly hear them. Listening is not a binary act. It is not something you either do or do not do. In reality, there are levels, depths to listening, and each level profoundly changes the quality of connection that is created. As leaders, we must learn to move beyond the shallow waters of hearing words and dive into the deeper currents where true understanding flows. Let us begin with the first and most common level, internal listening. This is where most communication begins and ends. In internal listening, you are technically hearing the other person speak, but your primary attention is still on yourself. You are thinking about your own ideas, your own emotions, your next statement. You might be nodding, you might even be making eye contact, but inside, your mind is racing. What do I think about this? How does this affect me? What will I say next? This level of listening is self-centered. It filters everything through the question, what does this mean for me? And while it is natural, if we stay here, we miss the profound opportunity that every conversation offers. The second level is focused listening. Here, something shifts. Instead of focusing on yourself, you begin to place your full attention on the speaker. You listen not just to the words, but to the emotions behind the words. You are attuned to the speaker's meaning, their intention, their feeling. You are not preparing a response while they are speaking. You are fully immersed in trying to understand their world as they experience it. At this level, the speaker feels the difference. They sense that they are truly being heard, that their words are not merely being processed, but honored. Trust deepens. Defensiveness drops. Authentic dialogue becomes possible. And then there is the third and deepest level, global listening. This is the rarest and most powerful form of listening. Here, you are not only listening to the speaker, but also to the space between you. You are attuned to the energy of the conversation, to the body language, to the unspoken emotions that vibrate beneath the surface. You are listening with all your senses, picking up what is said and what is not said. You notice the pauses, the hesitations, the sudden shifts in tone. You sense when something important is being approached or avoided. Global listening is almost a sixth sense. It is the art of being so present, so connected, that you can hear the conversation behind the conversation. Imagine the power of a leader who can operate at this third level. A leader who can sense emerging conflicts before they are voiced. A leader who can hear the silent cry for help beneath a confident report. A leader who can feel the pulse of the team, not through surveys or reports, but through living, breathing connection. Each level of listening opens new doors, doors to deeper trust, richer information, and more powerful leadership influence. The question you must ask yourself in every conversation is this: at what level am I listening right now? And if you find yourself slipping into internal listening, know this: it is not a failure. It is an invitation to return, to refocus, to listen more deeply, more fully, more humanly. Because when leaders learn to listen at all three levels, they do not just hear words. They hear people, they hear possibilities, they hear the future calling to be born. If active listening is so powerful, why is it so rare? Why do so many conversations, especially in leadership contexts, remain trapped at the surface level, full of misunderstanding, missed opportunities, and unseen emotions? The answer lies in the psychological barriers that stand between us and true listening. These barriers are not external. They are not caused by the noise of the world or the speed of modern life, though those may exacerbate them. They are internal. They live within us. And if we do not recognize them, they quietly sabotage even our best intentions. The first and perhaps most common barrier is ego. Ego is the inner voice that says, "I already know, I have the answer. I must appear smart, competent, authoritative." When we lead from ego, listening becomes a performance rather than a practice. We may pretend to listen while inwardly preparing our brilliant response. We may hear only selectively, filtering out anything that challenges our preferred narrative. Ego turns conversations into competitions: who is right, who is smarter, who wins, and in doing so, it kills the open, humble spirit that true listening requires. The second barrier is emotional triggering. Some topics, words, or tones of voice ignite emotional reactions within us before we even realize it. Maybe it is a criticism that touches an old wound. Maybe it is a challenge that threatens our sense of competence. When we are triggered, we stop listening. We move into self-protection. Our bodies tense, our minds race to defend, attack, or withdraw. We no longer hear the speaker's reality. We hear only our own fear or anger echoing back at us. The third barrier is cognitive overload. In the frantic pace of leadership, with dozens of priorities competing for attention, true listening can feel like a luxury we cannot afford. We sit in meetings while mentally reviewing deadlines, composing emails, worrying about upcoming decisions. We hear the words, but we do not absorb their meaning. Our minds are simply too full, too distracted, too fragmented to be truly present. Each of these barriers, ego, emotional triggering, and cognitive overload, is a natural human response. They are not signs of weakness. They are signs of being human, but they are also deadly to leadership communication if left unchecked. The first step is awareness. To notice when ego rises up, when emotional triggers flare, when the mind drifts into multitasking. To catch ourselves gently, without judgment, and return to the speaker with renewed presence. Because active listening is not a passive state. It is a disciplined, courageous act of self-transcendence. It asks us to set aside our self-centeredness, our defenses, our distractions, not forever, but for these sacred moments when another human being is speaking their truth into our care. As a leader, your listening will often be more impactful than your speaking. Your ability to overcome the inner barriers to presence will define the emotional climate of your leadership far more than any brilliant strategy or stirring speech. True listening is rare because it is hard. And precisely because it is hard, it is precious beyond measure. It is easy to underestimate the damage caused by poor listening. After all, the effects are rarely immediate. They do not announce themselves with alarms and flashing lights. No one storms into your office shouting, "You failed to listen to me properly." No, the costs of poor listening accumulate quietly, invisibly, day by day, conversation by conversation, until one day a leader turns around and wonders why trust has evaporated, why motivation has withered, why conflicts are raging just beneath the surface. Let us make these costs visible. First, misunderstandings and mistakes proliferate. When leaders do not listen carefully, critical nuances are missed. Clarifications are never sought. Unspoken concerns are left to fester. Instructions are interpreted differently by each team member. Strategic plans crumble, not because the ideas were flawed, but because the execution was built on a foundation of half-heard assumptions and overlooked fears. Tiny miscommunications become massive operational failures. Second, trust erodes. Trust is not a matter of grand gestures. It is built or destroyed in the small moments, in whether someone feels seen, valued, heard. When leaders do not listen, people quickly conclude that their voices do not matter. And when people feel invisible, they disengage. They do just enough to survive. They stop bringing their creativity, their passion, their full humanity to the work. Listening is not a soft courtesy. It is a generator of commitment. It is a declaration. You matter. Your perspective matters. Third, poor listening escalates conflict. Minor tensions that could have been easily resolved through early attentive listening instead grow in the shadows of misunderstanding. Resentments deepen. Grievances harden. Polarization replaces dialogue. By the time the leader notices the conflict, it has often metastasized beyond easy repair. A small misunderstanding about a project timeline becomes a fundamental breakdown of trust. A misinterpreted comment in a meeting becomes the spark that ignites organizational division. And finally, emotional withdrawal takes root. Perhaps the most dangerous outcome of poor listening is not visible conflict, but invisible disengagement. People stop caring. They stop trying. They emotionally retreat behind walls of cynicism and self-protection. And once emotional withdrawal sets in, re-engaging a team becomes a monumental task. Every time a leader fails to listen, they send a powerful unspoken message. I already know everything I need to know. And that message breeds silence, fear, and distance. But when a leader listens, truly listens, they send a different message. You are valuable. You are heard. You belong here. That message breeds loyalty, energy, and shared ownership. The cost of poor listening is invisible until it is catastrophic. The reward of active listening is invisible at first, but over time, it creates organizations where trust flows, creativity thrives, and human potential is unleashed. Every conversation is a fork in the road, disengagement or deeper connection, poor listening or transformational leadership. The choice is ours, moment by moment, word by word. Now that we have seen the immense cost of poor listening, it is time to turn toward mastery. Active listening is not merely a noble intention. It is a concrete set of skills, practices, and habits that can be cultivated deliberately, day by day. And when these skills are practiced with real commitment, they become second nature, a way of being that transforms every conversation you touch. The first foundational technique is presence. True presence is rare and unmistakable. It is the act of giving someone your full, undivided attention, mentally, emotionally, physically. It means putting down your phone, closing your laptop, setting aside the endless stream of thoughts about other projects, and offering yourself fully to the speaker. Presence is felt. It tells the speaker, without a single word, you matter. This moment matters. Without presence, no listening technique will work. With presence, even imperfect words will create connection. The second core technique is reflecting. Reflecting means summarizing or paraphrasing what the speaker has said, not mechanically, but with real care. It is saying, what I hear you saying is, or it sounds like you're feeling. Reflecting does two powerful things. It shows the speaker that you are truly engaged, and it allows for immediate clarification if you have misunderstood. Reflecting is not about agreeing or disagreeing. It is about making sure you are hearing accurately. It slows down the conversation in a way that deepens trust and clarity. The third essential technique is clarifying. Even when we listen carefully, we must resist the temptation to assume we fully understand. People often struggle to articulate what they really mean. Their words may only hint at deeper truths. Clarifying means asking open-ended questions that invite elaboration. Can you tell me more about that? What does that mean for you? How does that connect to what you mentioned earlier? Clarifying is an act of humility, the humility to acknowledge that we do not always grasp the full picture on the first try. These three techniques, presence, reflecting, and clarifying, form the bedrock of active listening. But they are not mechanical tricks. They must be infused with genuine curiosity and care. If used as mere tactics, they feel manipulative and hollow. But if used as expressions of a sincere desire to understand another human being, they create magic. Mastering these skills requires practice. It requires catching yourself when you drift into internal listening. It requires the discipline to slow down conversations when necessary, even when the pressure to rush forward is strong. It requires choosing connection over efficiency, understanding over speed. Leadership is not about always having the right answers. Leadership is about creating the spaces where the best answers can emerge from yourself, from your team, from the dialogue itself. And that creation begins with the simple, radical act of truly listening. If active listening at its core is about truly hearing the speaker, then at its highest level, it is also about hearing what the speaker is not saying. Because in every conversation, there are two dialogues happening, the one made of words and the one made of silences, hesitations, shifts in tone, and subtle emotional currents. To listen only to the words is to miss half the story. Much of human communication is nonverbal. Studies suggest that the majority of emotional meaning is conveyed not through words, but through body language, facial expressions, tone of voice, and rhythm of speech. When the words and the body are aligned, understanding is straightforward. But when there is a gap, when the voice says everything is fine, but the shoulders are tense, the eyes dart away, the tone flattens, then the real message is hiding beneath the surface. As leaders, we must train ourselves to listen with our whole being, not just with our ears. We must tune in to the subtle language of posture, micro-expressions, breathing patterns, energy shifts. We must notice when someone avoids a topic, when their voice tightens as they speak about a certain issue, when enthusiasm suddenly fades at the mention of a new strategy. This deeper listening is not about suspicion or interrogation. It is about compassionate curiosity. It is about being sensitive enough to notice when a team member is struggling but unable to say it. It is about recognizing when excitement is real and when it is merely performative compliance. It is about hearing the unspoken fears that might derail a project if left unaddressed. One of the most powerful tools in reading between the lines is silence. Most people are profoundly uncomfortable with silence. When a conversation pauses, there is a natural urge to fill the gap with words. But skilled listeners know that silence is a fertile ground where hidden truths can surface. When you allow silence to stretch a little longer than feels comfortable, you create space for the deeper, more authentic message to emerge. Sometimes the most important thing said in a meeting is not what was spoken, but what was conspicuously left unsaid. Sometimes the real decision point is not in the arguments presented, but in the moment of hesitation, the glance exchanged, the emotional charge that enters the room. True leadership listening means asking yourself constantly, what is really happening here beneath the surface of this conversation? What emotions are present, even if they are not being named? What truths are trying to find their way into the open? Because when you learn to hear the unsaid, you become not just a better communicator. You become a shaper of reality itself. You address problems before they become crises. You support people before they are forced to ask for help. You lead, not by controlling the conversation, but by understanding its deepest currents. Listening to what is not said is a leadership superpower that transcends techniques. It is an art form. It is a gift. And it is cultivated through presence, patience, and the courageous willingness to feel more than you can explain. Let us now gather the strands of everything we have explored today and see clearly what lies before us. Active listening is not a minor leadership skill. It is not a decorative addition to your toolkit. It is the foundation, the invisible, often uncelebrated foundation upon which true leadership stands. If you cannot listen deeply, you cannot lead deeply. If you cannot hear the emotions, the hopes, the fears beneath the words, you cannot truly move people. If you cannot create spaces where people feel heard and seen, you cannot ignite their best thinking, their full commitment, their most courageous selves. Active listening builds psychological safety, the sense that this is a place where it is safe to speak the truth, to take risks, to be human. And psychological safety, research shows us again and again, is the single greatest predictor of team success, innovation, resilience, and loyalty. When you listen with presence, you send a message louder than any motivational speech. You matter. Your perspective matters. Your voice belongs here. When you reflect and clarify, you slow down the frantic pace of modern work just enough to allow real understanding to bloom. You prevent small misunderstandings from becoming organizational wounds. You build bridges where there might otherwise be walls. When you listen for what is not said, the fears, the doubts, the tensions lurking just below the surface, you lead not reactively, but proactively. You spot storms on the horizon before they crash into your team. You support people before their struggles become crises. And above all, when you listen fully, you invite something extraordinary. You invite people to think better in your presence, to feel safer, to become more of who they are meant to be. In the mirror of your listening, they find not just answers, but themselves. Leadership is not about being the loudest voice in the room. It is about creating spaces where the best ideas, the deepest truths, the most powerful commitments can emerge naturally. Leadership is not about dominating the conversation. It is about stewarding conversations that transform. The leaders who change the world are not always the ones who speak most brilliantly. Often, they are the ones who listen most fiercely, most patiently, most humanly. So I leave you today with a simple but profound challenge. In your next conversation, with a colleague, a friend, a team member, listen not to reply, but to understand. Listen not just with your ears, but with your heart. Listen not just for information, but for transformation. Because when you master listening, you master leadership itself.